Xprofessor here from Rounding Some Corners, also on TikTok. And can you just imagine seeing three people standing outside of a convenience store where one person is eating a donut, nom 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 nom. Another person is drinking a cup of coffee, and another person is standing there with this, taking the cap off, pushing the paste through onto their finger, and putting it into their mouth. No way would you see that. Somebody pretty soon would be saying, call the cops, there's a drug addict outside. And therein lies the problem that marijuana faces. Because even though this is a perfectly legal product, it's called RSO, Rick Simpson oil, purchased from a dispensary in the state of Pennsylvania, marijuana users do not have that freedom to openly consume marijuana in public like other people are consuming products with drugs, such as coffee and caffeine or donuts and sugar. So in today's video lecture installment of Marijuana as Doxa, we are taking on another dimension of Doxa. Marijuana's Doxa being a dangerous drug. That's the Doxa that exists for marijuana. Remember, Doxa is an area of knowledge that gets constructed over time through society's institutions. Sometimes it can be constructed over generations. The problem is it ends up being an area of knowledge that gets set aside as undiscussable, unapproachable because it's assumed to be true. And that's a big problem when the doxa is false or even immoral, as was the case with slavery, as was the case with putting asbestos in people's houses to keep them warm, as was the case with doctors in the 60s telling mothers that they couldn't feed babies with their own breast milk. These were all examples of doxa that were finally overturned through careful inspection and examination. So today we're taking on a relationship between marijuana and rock and roll. Marijuana and rock and roll, they go together, right? You would think that there's no greater friend to marijuana than rock and roll, because rock and roll is full of people like my man Keith Richards. My man Keith Richards has been very open in his talk about his marijuana use. In a 2015 Billboard interview, he says, "To me, pot is just fun." And I'm glad to see the rest of the country coming around to my way of seeing things. He goes on to say, "I love my pot, love my weed, unashamedly a fan, a good piece of hash now and then." That, unfortunately, is not the way that rock and roll artists have talked about marijuana and cannabis in rock and roll music. And that's what I want to highlight in this video. I can tell you there's a lot of music out there that addresses weed in some way in rock and roll, but just for a start, try and find use of the word marijuana. There aren't that many uses. I can tell you because I was a disc jockey for almost 40 years. Rock and roll was my genre, and I was a disc jockey at my previous universities. You won't find marijuana in the lyrics of many songs. And that right there shows you the oppression of the doxa, even against an art form that is naturally anti-establishment and should naturally want to be talking about marijuana openly. Now though, let's take a look at 4 songs. Now there are many songs out there, but these 4 I think really help cement this doxa of marijuana as a dangerous drug. And the first one we're going to take a look at is Bob Dylan's Rainy Day Woman from 1966. Most people know the refrain of this song. Everybody must get stoned. On the outside, it seems like a great song. It's actually talking somewhat openly, even though marijuana, the term, is not used, about the process of smoking. In those days, marijuana, that was the only delivery system that was available. But the problem with the song is it's commanding people to use marijuana. And it's telling them that everybody is using it. So by implication, if you're not using it, you don't belong. Everybody must get stoned. That is no way to introduce marijuana to a person who's thinking about it. It should be entirely a choice, and if you don't choose it, fine. On top of that, the song has a very disorganized and chaotic feel to it. It's a beautiful song. Don't get me wrong, it's really interesting. But the song also has a cacophony of circus sounds to it. And it does not sound like a song that gives you comfort if you're taking in marijuana. Take a listen for yourself and see if you agree.
Everybody must get stoned. All right.
All right, so Rainy Day Woman by Bob Dylan, I don't think did many favors for marijuana. Let's go on to the next song now. This is 1 year later, 1967. It's a Beatles song, even though Ringo is singing it. He didn't sing that many songs for the Beatles, but he sung With a Little Help from My Friends in 1967. And that song was known because of the refrain, get high with a little help from my friends, but the word high is not even in the title of the song. The big problem, however, is because Ringo presents himself as a plaintive, needy person. He's pleading for people I want to get high with a little help from my friends. I just need somebody to love. That is no way to present marijuana. You don't need your friends for marijuana. Marijuana is not going to bring you love. Ringo's a great singer, great song, but that song doesn't help. And you can decide for yourself right here if Ringo's too plaintive to help marijuana.
No, I get by with a little help from my friends. Get high with a little help from my friends. Gonna try with a little help from my friends. Do you need anybody? I need somebody to love. Could it be anybody? I want somebody to love.
Okay, so moving on with A Little Help from My Friends, we're going to go on to the third song now. This is 1 year later, 1967. It's a Doors song. It's Light My Fire. This song has a lot of problems as well. The song, once again, is not talking about marijuana openly, but it refers to weed. Girl, you couldn't get much higher. It's got a lot of metaphorical language in it. This song is problematic because of the sound of it, first of all. It's got crescendoing keyboards, and it's got a circular quality to it where the song seems to wander and not know where it's going. And then you have the haunting vocals from Jim Morrison throughout where he's actually yelling at the end. This is not a song that makes people feel good about using marijuana. On top of that, Jim Morrison is the spokesperson, and most people know Jim Morrison died in some way, shape, or form from his alcoholism. At the end of his career, he was giving concerts that he was interrupting with diatribes, angry diatribes where he was slurring his speech. And so Jim Morrison is not exactly the person you want to be carrying the banner for marijuana and rock and roll. You can give a listen to Light My Fire right here and see if you think this is a good ambassador for marijuana. All right, so that brings us now to our fourth song, and you've probably already been wondering, when is he going to mention this song? After all, it's probably the funniest marijuana song that's out there. It happens much later. The year is 2000. It's Afro Man, and the song is Because I Got High, which is all about all the things that he should have done, basic things to function in life, like having a girlfriend and keeping his house clean. I was supposed to keep my room. I was supposed to get my broom. None of that he was able to do because he got high. Now, everybody knows the song is a parody. We know that he's trying to present the absolute outside view of the way that people see marijuana who don't really understand it, but the song just reinforces the dangerous drug Doxa because it presents a person as being lazy because of weed. And that is part of marijuana's problem. So that song, Because I Get High, didn't do any favors. Look at the lyrics of all the things that he wasn't able to do, even though it's a parody.
I was gonna clean my room until I got high. I was gonna get up and find the broom, but then I got high. My room is still messed up, and I know why. Why, man? Yeah, cause I got high. Because I got high. Because I got high.
All right, now that takes us to the final song that I want to talk about. This is a fifth song. Now, this song almost got it right with marijuana, but it blew it in a big way. It was 1971. It's Black Sabbath, and the band is fronted by Ozzy Osbourne. And the song is Sweet Leaf. Great name for weed, great name for marijuana, but it's not the word marijuana. Nevertheless, in this song, Ozzy Osbourne says a lot of things that have to do with marijuana opening up his mind. He even says, and I think this is the most important statement in the song, he says, "You introduced me to my mind." And then he goes on later in the song, after that profound statement, I think, to say at the end, "The world will love you." He's predicting, yeah, he's sort of right in the year 2022 and beyond. But back then, he blew it. He blew it because the beginning of the song starts out with a nasty hacking cough. Who wants to associate marijuana with a nasty hacking cough? Especially since today, from the retrospective perspective of looking back almost 30 years, we can say there are many more delivery systems for marijuana, but in 1971, that really hurt marijuana as something that you're going to end up with a hacking cough from. Check it out. All right, so these are all examples, really core examples of rock and roll songs that have not helped marijuana, even though the songs themselves and the artists themselves probably disagree with the doxa of marijuana as a dangerous drug. Certainly when they're interviewed, they talk about it like Keith Richards, but in the music of rock and roll ends up reinforcing the doxa of marijuana as a dangerous drug. So even though rock and roll is here to stay, and marijuana is here to stay, they haven't really gotten together as they should.